How can I talk to my child?
My students need help.
I really need to talk to somebody. Is this normal?
I don't know how to respond.
What am I supposed to do?
Surely there's training somewhere to handle this.
Hello, I'm Robert Rabon, and I'm privileged to serve as the president of National Center for Youth Issues. And we're delighted today to have with us from Nashville, Tennessee, Rodger Dinwiddie. And Rodger, welcome to Chattanooga.
Thank you.
And Rodger is the Executive Director of Nashville-STARS, and that's a program that's been serving the Nashville metro area in many different capacities of children and youth development for, I guess, about 25 years now, right, Rodger?
Sure is. 25 years, hard to believe.
It's been amazing to watch STARS Nashville grow and the service that they've done to the Middle Tennessee area. And as a result of that, Rodger's expertise in areas like bullying prevention and student assistance programs has grown over the years, and he's become a trainer throughout the country on these issues. And he actually is a nationally certified trainer and technical assistance consultant for the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program, and that has opened up a lot of door of opportunity for Rodger to speak and train throughout the country, and it's a delight to have him here in Chattanooga with us today. And the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program is a comprehensive school-wide program designed for use in elementary, middle, and high schools. And today, Rodger will talk with us about the difference between bullying and normal conflict and how to address these issues. He'll help us understand both the facts and myths of bullying and how to help both victims and perpetrators. So, Rodger, with that introduction, we'll just dive right in.
That sounds great.
And thanks again for
Robert.
being
Good to be
here. And Rodger, the first question I'd like to ask you is, what are the critical things to understand when defining or addressing bullying?
Well, bullying is a complex issue, and it's not a simple. There's not a lot of simple solutions to deal with it. However, the critical ingredients of bullying, is important to remember that bullying happens when someone with more power uses that power to and influence to hurt someone else who has less power than they do. So there's like three main critical components of bullying, and those critical components are that there's an imbalance of power that's involved in bullying, that bullying is a repetitious act, it occurs over time, and bullying is done with the intent to actually cause harm to someone else. And that relationship occurs in which there is an imbalance of power. And a couple of other leaders in the field of bullying prevention have also added another ingredient to those kind of basic three things. And that fourth one is bullying also has an issue of terror associated with, which is a really important issue. That oftentimes people who bully others have a sense of contempt for those they bully, or a sense of complete disregard for them, minimizing simply their dignity and worth as individuals. So it's a very insidious issue. And as based upon those kind of 3 or 4 different criteria about what bullying is, the other part to bullying is that it's very different from any sort of conflict that one might exist. Conflict would be something that all of us experience on a day-by-day basis. And frankly, it's been said that if you don't have any conflict in your life, you probably don't have any relationships in your life, because there is a certain issue, and we've known about this for years, is that conflict comes because there are misunderstandings, disputes, things such as that, or there's a lack of property or a lack of resources or something along those lines. Where bullying is really an issue of abuse. Bullying has something to do with that power imbalance where one person really does things to harm another person, and bullying would be more closely akin to the issues of physical abuse, even maybe sexual abuse or neglect or something along those lines. Certainly those three issues have nothing to do with conflict per se. Those are issues of real distress and cause major problems in people's lives.
Well, it's a very complicated issue. There's a lot of aspects to it. It's interesting to hear you use the word terror and intentional, and appreciate that good definition. And are there common misconceptions about bullying?
There are a ton of misconceptions about bullying, and probably one of the ones that is the most debated and often discussed is that kids who bully, and even adults who bully sometimes, suffer from low self-esteem. And that's not true. Now, yes, there are some children who bully who do suffer from low self-esteem. Oftentimes those children who suffer from low self-worth, who bully, are young people who are bullied by others and then turn their bullying onto others in order to pump themselves up, if you will, and bolster themselves. But most kids who bully have a general average self-esteem. So that's a huge misconception. Basically, kids who bully have an average or general self-worth, and they're also extremely proficient at talking themselves out of really difficult situations. And frankly, most kids who are able to talk themselves out of really difficult situations are not kids who suffer from low self-worth. They're kids who suffer from a lack of empathy or a lack of concern for others, or they're extremely skilled and competent in using their verbal skills to outwit others. And they're often able to outwit not only their peers, but also adults as well. Another large misconception of bullying is that kids who bully, that bullying is largely a physical issue. In fact, a small percentage of bullying is actually physical in nature. Most bullying has to do with psychological trauma, emotional or social ostracization, isolation, exclusion, intimidation, those kind of things, which are not issues of physical assault or terror, if you will, but are issues of psychological trauma. So that's another big issue. And then probably the last one, or at least not the last one, but certainly one of significance, is that boys and girls bully the same. Generally speaking, boys tend to bully more physically, while girls tend to bully more psychologically. And it doesn't mean that both won't do the other, but certainly boys tend to bully more overtly, whereas girls tend to bully more covertly, if you will.
Great. And Rodger, why is it so important to say the word bullying behavior rather than labeling somebody a bully?
Well, you know, I hearken back to my days in undergraduate school, where a professor I had, who certainly I have always admired and held out, used to say something extremely profound. And it's simplistic but profound, and that is, labels are simply for jars. Mm-hmm. Labels are not for people. And when it comes to bullying, this is a critical issue, because one of the things we don't want to do is pinpoint some child as you are a bully, or you are a victim or a target of bullying. We want to use words such as a student who is bullied by others for those who receive bullying, and then a student who bullies, because truly bullying is a behavioral issue. We want to do everything we can to shy away from labeling young people as one or the other, because in fact, kids who bully and kids who are bullied by others can overcome those barriers and can in fact change. Once you get a label, it's very difficult to change. So we want to do everything we can to avoid labels.
Well, that's a very important distinction that you've made for us there. I haven't really thought about it that way, and appreciate your enlightening us on that.
Well, none of us want to be labeled as anything, particularly other than as human beings.
Right.
And we're all fortunate if we can avoid doing that, not only in the context of bullying, but also a variety of other issues as well.
Right. Rodger, I'd like to go back and explore a little bit the concept of the difference between bullying and normal conflict.
Okay.
So how do you deal with it, the difference between those two aspects?
That's an important question, and because conflict is something that happens amongst all people, and really it happens all day, every day. People have conflicts of so many different forms and types, that conflict is dealt with by either one, dealing with our own anger, dealing with our own strategies for conflict, how we address those issues, by managing our anger, by managing our conflicts, by talking through issues. And conflict can be dealt with through strategies such as mediation, negotiation, or even in some cases where people do have to adjudicate their conflicts when they're not able to solve them with normal conflicts, that if you and I have a disagreement, that we have to sit down and work through that issue, which is the normal way human beings interact when things happen. Poor conflict resolution strategies would be avoiding it or withdrawing from the conflict, whereas a healthy conflict resolution strategy would be facing that issue and attempting to address it. On the other hand, bullying needs to be dealt with in a strategy where adults are involved and kids are involved in realizing that you can't negotiate a bullying situation, because bullying is a form of abuse. So one of the big misdirections in practices that folks often use in trying to address bullying is using traditional conflict resolution strategies to deal with bullying. A huge misdirection. One of the solutions that's effective for dealing with bullying is to deal with bullying one-on-one. Deal with the child who's being bullied individually, deal with the child who is both doing the bullying and being bullied individually and separately, rather than putting those people down together and trying to mediate or negotiate that episode using normal conflict resolution strategies. And it becomes obvious why that's not such a good thing to do, because if you put a child together who bullies with a child who's been bullied and you attempt to use normal resolution strategies, you're going to end up with a continued power differential. So, and another form of even potential further abuse for that child who's being bullied.
Wow. Well, thanks for amplifying that for us a little more, Rodger. And you know, you and I have been doing this work for a long time.
Yes, we have.
Kind of grown up together in this, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
And one of the things that's really emerged and exploded on the scene in the last 5 to 8 years has been cyberbullying. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about cyberbullying. What is it? Is it different from normal bullying? Just amplify on that for us a little bit.
That's an important issue. And cyberbullying is just simply the repeated use of information technologies to harass or intimidate or threaten someone else. So in that sense, it has the characteristics of bullying, being an imbalance of power, being something done intentionally to cause harm to other people, so it's got in a repetitious behavior. The problem with cyberbullying and the difference between cyber and traditional bullying is, frankly, young people who are cyberbullied don't have even the potential to get away from it, because cyberbullying can be something that goes on literally 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, 365 days per year. And this sounds really almost simplistic, but at least with traditional bullying, sometimes the young person who's being bullied can at least escape the environment from which they're being bullied by either going home or away from the environment in which they're being bullied. That is not the case with cyberbullying. Probably the other piece that's so insidious about cyberbullying is it can happen so quickly and involve so many others so quickly when young people use text messaging and or emails and their distribution list to send something out to hundreds of people so quickly that one has no time to even respond or react. It's blasted all over everywhere very quickly once a person chooses to use that form of bullying. One of the issues that's important about cyberbullying that is very different from traditional bullying, kids will, and for that matter adults as well, will say things and do things behind a computer screen or using a screen that in fact they would never do face-to-face or even with a group perhaps in a cafeteria at school, because it's so much easier to do things insidiously and not overtly. It's tragic that kids send things to people that they would never, ever, ever think about doing. And in fact, the other part to it is some young people who are traditional, quote unquote, using a word that's not a healthy word to use, but children who are victims of bullying and or are targeted by others, oftentimes in cyberbullying world may be those kids who actually bully other people online because they found power behind the screen to get revenge on those that have bullied them in more traditional forms.
Yes, I tell you, it's a devastating thing. I think the media reports constantly of children being cyberbullied and the dramatic impact that it has on our children. And as we start to turn the corner here, Raj, and we've defined bullying and distinguished it between bullying and normal conflict, and it sounds to me like it's going to take adult intervention to address these really complicated and very deep issues, and particularly when you add the internet factor to it as well, where bullying can just explode in an instant, as you described it. Our programs mostly work in schools, and I know that's where the focus a lot of your work is. And what's so important about having an entire school focus on the issue of bullying, and how do you achieve that?
Well, one of the sort of a backing into that issue is that a myth that failed to be mentioned, that I failed to mention a moment ago, is that there is a perception sometimes that bullying occurs more out of school than it does in school. And that is a myth. In fact, most bullying, it seems from research, indicates that it shows up at school. So in order to deal with it in a school context, or even for that matter in an after-school environment or a before-school program, or even in a community center base, is that adults must be engaged in the process of being willing to step up to the plate and act as responsible adults. Adults need to claim their own responsibility in the issue, which is if a child comes and reports that they're being bullied, we simply need to take those reports seriously and act upon them and not minimize those issues or ignore those issues when kids come forward. If we ignore the reports that students have when they're bullied, what we send then is a message that it's tolerated. And that's where kids lose hope and faith in the ability of adults to do anything about it, is when repetitively adults don't respond to it. So what schools and community centers and other places need to do is use basically 3 or 4 things that are important. Number one, there must be a focus on the entire environment of that particular school and or after-school program, community center, where the bullying prevention programs are implemented, so that everyone in the environment focuses on the issue. All adults are engaged in the process, which means that staff training needs to occur. Staff training needs to address many of the issues that we've talked about during our time together today. Dealing with myths, dealing with appropriate definitions, and then third, there need to be consequences that are clearly outlined in advance so that when young people do bully, they know exactly what's going to happen. And then fourth, and one of the most important pieces of bullying prevention is that young people must be engaged in a process, and particularly with middle school and high school young people. Youth voice is absolutely critical to improving school climate and or the climate in that after-school or community-based program. If youth voice is not included in this process, then we're going to miss the huge opportunity to really engage them in solution seeking and finding for how to deal with bullying. So adults need to capture youth voice in a way that's powerful in order to deal with school climate. And you know, the important thing to remember is after young people are involved in these kinds of initiatives in school and whatnot, it's important to remember that if the adults act appropriately as adults and set those norms and establish those parameters so that young people feel safe and respected, the good news is grades improve, depression goes down, anxiety is minimized, and the climate is conducive to strong academic and social outcomes. So that's the important part about why adults must be engaged in a process.
Well, that's great, Rodger, and thanks for sharing that. So what you've really described is a systemic change
Absolutely.
In a school, and you've worked in this arena long enough. You've seen this actually happen. You've seen schools commit to this and change really take place, meaningful, sustainable change.
Absolutely, and you know, probably one of the most exciting opportunities we've had, particularly with the Olweus program, has been the change in attitudes of both young people and adults in those schools. We've had several schools in our area who've been involved in that particular initiative for a number of years now, and actually saw 86% reductions in their school office referrals as a result of their intervention in the building by using the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program. We also have seen in that particular environment, we've seen almost a 70% reductions in reports of bullying behavior through the course of surveying over the course of 3 years, which is really exciting. And that is way beyond what many of the national norms are, but this is through a school that really worked hard under the initiative and have taken it seriously every step of the way to do something about it. But it's involved both young people and adults at the table solving this particular issue.
Well, I like the way we've turned the corner here in the interview, Rodger, is that obviously if you just focused on the bullying and the behavior, one could really get down. It's something that's been common to man throughout time.
Absolutely.
It's an issue, but the exciting thing to me, and in the course of my career and in working with you and others in this arena, is to see a program like the Olweus method emerge that really works, and that if communities and schools, after-school programs will commit to the concepts and the ideas of this type of program, change really does take place.
Absolutely.
And so there's hope, and I know that in our work throughout the country at National Center for Youth Issues, everywhere we go, bullying is the #1 issue. You ask every school district, what are your issues? In almost every case, bullying is the first thing mentioned. Of course, now we hear cyberbullying is along with it. Of course, it's all the same. And so we're quick to point out the Olweus method, and that if there are solutions if you'll commit yourself to it. But it's not something you can take your finger out of the dike on.
No.
I mean, you have to commit yourself to it for a long period of time and then stay with it once you've committed to it.
Well, that's a really interesting point that you just made. And, you know, Dr. Susan Limber, who's one of the most well-respected individuals in the country at Clemson University around bullying, outlined some basic principles some time ago that schools need to seriously look at when implementing the program. And the last point you made is that you can't unplug your finger from the situation. Right. Because one of the critical issues is if you do focus on the school environment, you do a survey to really understand what's going on, you engage parents, you train staff, and you have a committee in the building who really coordinates the efforts. You do what you can to make sure there are clear posted rules so that everybody understands what those boundaries are. And the clear first rule is, and the Olweus rule is, we will not bully others. And if we do that, then we increase supervision in those areas of the school or community center where kids are more prone to bully, where there's unsupervised time. We really focus on those consequences and making sure that there's a consistent commitment to intervene appropriately in consistency. And then we have time with kids to discuss those issues through class meetings and things like that. The final step is that we can't quit, because if we quit, things will return to where they were, even though they may have been markedly better. If we stop our initiatives, and we will never, ever be without the issue of bullying. Right. But we can reduce it greatly through those kind of 10 best practices that were just outlined for what schools really need to do about the problem.
Yeah. You know, and Rodger, just as we close our interview today, it's always a delight to be with you. And Rodger and I have been working together for over 20 years now, almost 25 years, and it's been a delight to watch Rodger grow in this area and become respected throughout the country. And the thing that I just love about you, Rodger, is you haven't lost your passion. And it's just exciting to sit here with you and to hear your passion. And I'm thankful that there are good folks like yourself that are out there on a constant basis addressing this issue. You know, when I was growing up, I was really not bullied very much, and I wasn't a bully. I was that kid in the middle, but I didn't know how to find my voice. I saw the injustice. It bothered me deeply, and even as an adult looking back, it brings remorse that I was not able to find my voice and do more. But what you've described today, as we've talked about solutions, one of the key strands in there, adults must help those middle ground kids like I was find their voice and create that systemic change in their school environment or whatever environment they find themselves in.
And you know, Robert, I appreciate your kind words, and it's been a joy to be with you too. And as you mentioned that, probably one more important point, that if we closed with something, this would maybe be the most important point. The good news is, in schools, through survey data, that more students want to do the right thing than don't, which is remarkably encouraging. When asked questions on the Olweus questionnaire, what do you think or feel when you see somebody your age being bullied? Between 65, and this is in our area, that I'll just use our database, between 65 to 85% of the kids said, I don't like it when somebody's being bullied. The problem is it's mobilizing those young people who are in that middle ground, as you described it, to actually take action on the basis of their feelings, because they don't like it. If we can mobilize that crew to act through the kind of strategies that we've talked about, then we can, in fact, improve school climate, and we certainly can eliminate this issue of bullying in schools so that kids feel safe and respected in the environments in which they live every day.
Well, and as we close, the issue you bring up of feeling safe, and we all want to feel safe. It's one of our basic needs,
Yes,
and particularly as National Center for Youth Issues, our mantra is to help school systems overcome barriers to learning.
Right.
And bullying, without a doubt, is one of the major barriers to learning. If you don't feel safe when you go to school, then you're not there to learn. You're there for survival and to dodge the bully, so to speak. So what have we learned today? Bullying is not the same thing as normal conflict. Bullying is defined by an imbalance of power between victim and perpetrator, and a repetitious behavior with the intent to harm. Cyberbullying is an insidious and growing form of bullying. It involves repeated use of technology to harass. It can go on 24/7, and it's not an isolated occurrence. It creates even more emotional detachment from the victim. Some of the myths of bullying are: most bullying occurs outside of school. Bullying can be addressed like the resolution of normal conflict. Most bullying is physical in nature. Most children who bully have low self-esteem. Entire environmental change is the most successful approach to decrease bullying. This involves staff training, clear consequences outlined in advance. Young people must be engaged in the process, and a persistent focus on bullying prevention. Well, Rodger, it's always a pleasure to see you and to spend time with you, and thanks again for making your way to National Center for Youth Issues to provide some really outstanding information on the very complicated issue of bullying.
Thanks so much. It's been great to be here.
Thank you. If you're interested in bringing Rodger to your area, you may contact National Center for Youth Issues at 1-800-477-8277, or you may visit our website at www.ncyi.org. And thank you for joining us.